I'm Karthika, I'm an editor, and these are the wonderful people you're going to hear from, speaking on that rather television-like question, how do you feel? How do you feel as a comic creator? That's a subject we have today. And a couple of people on the panel have said it's not exactly a subject they are comfortable speaking about, perhaps, or is that even relevant to the art itself? So let's make it relevant, let's make it interesting. And I know you've all been speaking at the festival so far, so it doesn't particularly make sense to introduce you. So shall we just start the conversation, and then will you chip in and out as the conversation goes by, rather than do a one after the other? So who wants to go first? Arne, do you want to go first and tell us how you feel?
Okay, yeah, maybe it's a bit like I became a comic artist almost by coincidence. I really wanted to be a filmmaker, actually. So I love storytelling with images. So, but I really like the moving images, actually. So, but when the movie career, and I think it was 2006 and 2007, don't really started out. So I made a few short films, but then, you know, I was a bit frustrated that my feature film couldn't be financed. So I just thought maybe I send my next idea to a comic publisher. And then they said yes, and so my first book came out. So that's why I became a comic artist, actually. So it's just, I wanted to make a movie, and it's a movie in my head, but in the end it's a comic book. So
Happy with that?
Yeah, no, I'm very happy with that, but I have to say, yeah, I talked about it with other artists, how it is to be a comic artist. It's often an issue when we. So for me, the most interesting thing when I worked on the most important thing when I worked on my second book was the money problem, because I have a family, I have 2 children, and really when you sell, I think estimated 6,000 copies of a book, and you work on it like 3 years, and you get money like, I don't know, 8% per sold copy. 7.5. You know, I think I had a better contract than that. So
this
maybe
is not
it was
a good place
8%.
for me.
I was 8%, so it's really a struggle somehow. So that's why you have to keep the deadlines. You have a good plan, and you have a little bit of a, you know, money to get along with during the time while you're working on the book. So that was quite different. And you have to explain to your family why are you doing this sad stuff that you don't earn money with. And it was really tough to have to say no to a lot of commissions. I had to cancel a lot of things. So that was really, and then I was behind schedule, and it was really kind of struggling somehow. Yeah, that was my situation during that. It's not as glorious as it seems to be.
I'm tempted to ask if it's been worth it.
Thank you. Yeah, that in the end, it's really like a very like a drama. So really, I thought I would do it never again I will do this, because I was really kind of broke in the end. And then now the reviews were very good and were better and better, and there were lots of more reviews. And you know, it's just sold really good. I have to say, it's kind of, now it's the best-selling comic book of the publisher for 2017. Maybe not as good as those, but we are the two bestsellers right now. But that means for now it means like 13,000 sold copies of it, which is very good for such a book. But no, when you work 3 years on it, it's really.
Right.
It's not very economical.
Okay, so I'm going to ask other people to chip in here and tell us if this has been worth it.
Yeah, I guess, I think I actually enjoy freelance life a lot. I know it might sound like a cliche, but I think it's better for me to go through that cycle of feeling bored and lonely and frustrated with work, and then still managing to create work within that. Did I answer the question right? I don't know. What was it like getting into it? I don't know, just jumping into the deep end of the pool, I guess, because I was discussing this with someone earlier. Maybe once you know the things that you don't like, it's easier to kind of, not easy, but it's, I think that when I started freelancing, I started realizing that, yeah, comics is something I really like, or I'm better in it than a few other things that I can do. I kind of, yeah.
I just, like Arne was mentioning, very incidentally got into comics. I have a whole background of studying painting, doing a lot of street art. And then one day a friend comes up to me and says, hey, Anpu, make a comic. I'm like, oh, okay, I can make a comic. It was not about, it's a completely different language from what I was used to, and usually I have a final picture and I don't have to say much more. I'm more interested in silent comics. 2014, I self-published my first comic, and then I was invited to the residency. And I've been making comics ever since, and it's such a liberating feeling to make comics because I don't have to say one thing in one page, and I can do anything I want with all the pages proceeding. I can take a time and drop it and pick it up in another way, and it was such a beautiful way to express things I could never express before. So I've actually benefited a hell of a lot to the comics tradition right now. And I've not even studied comics, so I feel like my life has just begun. So I don't know, it's been a bigger plus point than anything else right now.
Okay. I've actually very recently started making comics. I'm a graphic designer by profession, but like a very smart person, I think I decided to not do something that probably pays better in India, but decided to do illustration and comics. I don't know, like for me, it's been interesting. Like I guess a lot of artists would feel this way, like the things that you don't really put effort into and you just end up making, in your free time, it tends to resonate a lot with people. That's sort of how I started making comics, and then somewhere somebody decided to commission comics. And recently, actually, somebody approached me for a project where they wanted to make portraits of women. I think that's the new rage now, like Goodnight Stories for Rebel Girls. Everybody wants to make portraits of women, but kind of managed to convince them that, maybe we should make comics out of this so you can tell a little bit of the story within the format that you have, and that way there is a better chance that people will read the story than reading the text separately and seeing the image separately, and they got convinced. So then they kind of commissioned me to do comics based on these women's stories. Has it been worth it? Yeah, I mean, I'm just starting, and this whole 3-day festival has been great. I got to learn that there's no money, it's a dark future. So yeah, great. I mean, yeah, it should be fun. Let's see.
For me, it's a little bit different because I'm quite often an old rabbit in the round. I do comic books since more than 20 years, and I started working in comic books when I was still studying, and I had kind of a jump start up to the top in the beginning, and from then on my career was slowly crumbling, and then it came up again. And I remember at the beginning, it was in the middle of the 90s, I had some really, really big ideals about what you can do with comic books, what you can achieve, what you can reach audience, what you can do with it, and slowly the people around me, the people from my publishing house, destroyed my ideals, and they said, that's the distributor, it's not working. That's what I heard most of the time. No, that's not working that way. So right now, the situation in Germany changed a lot for comic books, and comic books became more accessible in the media and for the readers, and with the movement of the graphic novels, the German comic book scene changed a lot. And right now we have bookstores that sell comic books in the front and not in the crappy dark corner in the back. And we have big comic book stores that actually have huge windows where light comes in. Before, comic book stores were more like for people doing this. And
and medias are reporting about comic books, TV stations, they make reports about comic books, and so the situation changed a lot, and at the moment I have the feeling that I reached all the ideals that I had when I started working in comic books. So we have big authors working together with comic artists on projects. We have media's reporting about it, and so yeah, comic books are treated more or less the same way like written literature or movies are treated in the media. So that's a big thing that happened, and I'm really happy that I'm part of that movement right now. And yes, I had really hard time. The first 8 years after my studies, I had really hard time to survive with my art. I had to do other jobs. I was the driver at the film festival and stuff like that, just to survive my everyday life in Berlin. But now I'm in the happy situation that I can say I live from my comic books, and I think that's worth it.
That's fantastic. But can you tell us a little bit more about what brought that change about in Germany?
That was a big effort from some publishing houses. The term graphic novel is well known in America and France, I guess. Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, and so some publishing houses in Germany, they got together and they said, okay, we have to do something in Germany. Comic books are considered only for children, so people just know Asterix and Mickey Mouse and stuff like that. And but comic books can be so much more. So why not install the name graphic novel in Germany as a way to establish comic books for adults? And so they put a lot of effort in it. And at the same time, books came out like the comic reports from Joe Sacco or Persepolis by Marian Satrapi, and or Craig Thompson's Blankets, and so that started the movement of graphic novels. And now the term is established, and the people they want to read graphic novels. They want to read adult people want to read adult stories in the form of a comic book, and it was just that this name had to be established.
Thank you. It's a very different story in India from this. So maybe you guys can tell us something about this. Sarnath, you want to go first? You're like between Germany and India, right? So you can be the bridge.
What's the question?
Sarnath Banerjee. What? No, I mean seriously, he's talking about how publishing actually transformed in Germany for comic books and graphic narratives happen. But you've been at the start of the battle here to make it actually establish itself. Yeah. I'm not saying that we haven't come very far, we have. There's a lot more writers, a lot more publishing, a lot more awareness. Yeah. But does it feel that we haven't done enough, or does it feel like we have indeed come a long way?
No, I think definitely we've come a long way from when we started. And Indian comic book, as you would know, and is very versatile, subject-wise, and quite refreshingly represented by different communities, gender, because often comic book in, at least in America and England, are attributed to a certain kind of population, the type of people who read comics. That has never been a problem here because there's no extra baggage of, that sort of things. So content-wise, I think we've succeeded in putting out various types of a diverse amount of comics. So that's a success, I think. In terms of sales and marketing, no, it's the same story. You can't live on comics. It'll be impossible to.
You don't think a certain kind of person is reading comics in India too? That you can actually, it is a fairly niche kind of group of people who do it?
You would know that.
No, No, it's not my thing. You guys tell me. Who are your readers? Who are your readers in India?
Yeah, what do you think?
I've kind of come to the conclusion that comics are not going to pay me for some time, so we have to like deal with it. But I love to make comics, so I want to make comics. So if that satisfaction happens at the end of the day or the end of the page, that's what I take home and go to sleep with. The money at the end of like 3 years of work is not so much, but that's also because the sales are not that much and all that. But like we are all getting the same percentage, like he said, so that's at least like comforting. But we don't have that big hit as yet. So let's see. I think how I sustain it is through just making sure the work is giving me satisfaction. Because you can't. There are other projects that you do. It was always been like that. There are paintings and stuff to give you money for the time being, and you do what you like, and you can't complain about it in this scene. I think yet, because you'll just be whining. So maybe we have to like come up with some solid stuff that gets through, or the scene has to develop. It's not like 1 or 2 people alone can create a scene. So we're sort of, I think the publishers are also waiting for that, which is why they want to publish all this stuff, right?
Yeah, but do you think it's also not just about the scene or the market or the readers, but is there something about the content that prevents us from getting more readers? I mean, please feel free to. This is not meant to say that the content isn't good or qualitatively or whatever, but I'm wondering whether what we put out as graphic narratives are either not accessible enough or not the kinds of stories that they used to, or is there something that is an obstruction within the book rather than just the marketing of it?
Like you said, we have quite a variety of things out here, and even though there's a lot of variety between the things that we all make, there's a bunch of stuff outside also where it's just plain like mythology retelling and glorifying the jingo part of it. Everything is being the commercial side is definitely being tried because Bollywood is so strong. And incidentally, like I thought I wanted to I want to tell stories, and I was in Bombay, so I went and like tried some animation studios and film studios, and I know that my ideas will never be made into anything over there if I want to make it the way I want to make it. So for me, comics was the way to like put out the idea the way I want it. I have my time and I have some skill at the time, and I'm trying to work on that. So we can put it out the way we want it, and it will come out in that tone. We won't have to add a song or a fight sequence to like sell it better. But they're doing that also. Still, I don't think anybody's like really cracked it. Otherwise, we'll all be making that kind of stuff and like making tons of money.
Money is a kind of frequent motif here. So what should we talk about in terms of your response to this? Because, okay, this is possibly sounding very odd, but there's like 2 generations of artists here. In a sense, you guys started up and stay on top. But these are people who work with a very different market as well, right? When you came in, there were other people already doing it, and you stepped into territory that you could kind of fit yourselves into a little bit. Do you want to talk about what's happening on the ground now in terms of the kind of work you get? If you get commissioned, then what kind of commissions come in? Where do you see the scene going?
Coming to what you just said, I think at least thinking back to when I was in college and I started thinking, okay, there are these guys making comics. I think it was slightly easier. At least I can speak for the bunch of people in my age group or class or whatever around then, knowing that there were, I remember seeing something called the Power Collective and being like, okay, wow, there's a collective of people actually making comics in India. It's a book. I guess people are buying it. So, and till then, I was following I was following all these, Western comic artists. Like for me, that was the feed I was getting. I didn't have anyone else to teach me stuff. Maybe someone would lend me a book once in a while. And I definitely have to credit like social media, at least like I can see it for me and other contemporaries, because the minute you leave college, you make your Facebook page or Instagram or whatever, but it was kind of normalized. So in terms of spreading your work or talking about yourself, there was a certain avenue. Like the money is definitely as terrible as it always was, but I feel like there was some sort of a space to crawl into as like an independent comic artist, like where you're trying to make your own content.
I've obviously only made my own content. I've not done any illustrations or any collaborations. And I think what I want to add is when I self-published, I brought the book from Shillong to Bombay to Bangalore to Delhi, and it was very widely received, and out of 500 copies, I've sold 400, 100 I've gifted. For me, it was a great platform. I put 10 out here, 10 of it got sold. I put 10 at the Indie Comics Fest, 9 of it got sold in one day. So the reach is large. Whatever you can do is also, you can also market it yourself. So it's not like you have to wait for someone to do it. But, and it's not that hard, the satisfaction is just great. The minute someone comes back and buys 4 copies and says, this is a Christmas present for 4 people I know are going to love it, and don't stop doing what you're doing. So I guess I get a lot of feedback more than most of the artists here because they don't really meet the people. I've been fortunate enough to actually meet the people I'm actually selling the comics to. So yeah, that's just been a great driving force for me, I guess.
So I've actually, this event has been really great in the sense that the comic artists that I've looked up to in college, I was telling George that I read his comic in my foundation year in college, and Priya and Kaveri's work, we saw it in college, and that was kind of the idea that I had. And I actually had the opportunity to intern with Amar Chitrakatha, and coming back to your question about certain kinds of comic readers, I think that's definitely there, especially with an institution like Amar Chitrakatha. There are certain kinds of stories that reach a mass audience better, even translation or things like that, like Chacha Chaudhary and all of those things, but not the indie stuff so much. But commission projects, for me personally, it's not been so much with the publishing industry. It's been individual organizations or just individuals who come to me because they want to work on a certain subject or a theme. It's never, do you want to do a comic or a portrait or whatever. This is the topic and this is what we have, and then just because I try to push my agenda of doing comics and everything, and somehow some projects work out, some don't. But so that's been interesting for me, because I think when you're just discussing the subject, there are also lesser restrictions. There is no dictation in terms of how many panels I should do or how I should color it or should it be black and white. These kind of discussions never happen. So that's kind of been interesting. I actually have no experience working with the publishing industry, with comics. I mean, I've just done book covers. Yeah.
Andy, should we take some questions? Yeah? I know a lot of panelists, so there's plenty for you to ask, but...
Just so in general, I cannot say something about it. I have to see the work, and I have to see what your main character would be, the description about it. So, I mean, that's for me, that's the first step for developing a main character, is that I try to realize what he's all about, what's the way of his thinking, and then yeah, I start to think about how this person would act, how he would enter a room, for example, how I would depict him, and what kind of gesture and everything. So it's hard to say that in general. I would need more background information for that.
My question would be, do you have a script for that? So is the character already in the written
Yeah, it's in the written. I have his personality in mind and his origins and all, but I'm not satisfied with my designs.
Okay, so you have the character as a written human being?
Yeah, it's a human
it's
being.
Working?
Yeah.
Okay, so you don't. Okay.
It's just that it doesn't have that feel of a lead role. This will be my lead role in the comic, right?
Yeah, it's really, I had to say, that was the same problem with me. That you have to make a decision finally. That's my character, and then you have to feel it somehow, that this is the right thing. But it's tough, I know.
So
it's
really, just
difficult.
it will click someday. Yeah, this will be my character, right?
Yeah, for me it's in the feeling. I say, well, that's it.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Can I just take that just a little bit to say that I'm not very sure of this. I know that there have been books that are cheaply priced, black and white, small paperback, etc. It's not like one has seen that if that same book had been priced as paperback opposed to hardback, it would have sold XYZ more. It hasn't yet happened. So I don't think we have enough evidence to tell us that price decides it. And the reason that it's so expensive is simply that it's a matter of scale. I mean, the answer is in that, right? If you print 15,000 copies as opposed to 3,000 copies, you'd be able to put a better price on it. But because one is restrained by the number of copies that you think you will sell, you therefore can't get that price on it. So it's like this vicious cycle that nobody knows how to break yet, except Amar Chitra Katha and narratives like that, which work for a completely different audience and in very different numbers.
I've generally seen in comics, it's more the story, and you have people doing stick figures or anything to like express the story. So I would say that whatever goes best for the story, what is needed to tell the story better is what I would go with. I haven't really distinguished much between sketching and drawing. Like that.
Arne, you looked like you wanted to add to that.
Maybe I don't know if I get this right, the question, but I have to say, in general, I like my sketches much more than the final cleanup drawings. I think that many artists say when you talk about it, that the cleanup drawing really kills a lot of spontaneity and feeling of the first sketch. But for the final reader, it has to be a cleanup drawing, or most of the time. So, yeah, I think that's a problem, the thing between sketching and final drawing. So a lot of people, I heard some readers say, I don't want to see that it's a drawing. You know, I want to be go into the story really. I don't want to think about it that it's a drawing. So and that sometimes is difficult. But you as an artist, I think you like your sketches much more than the final drawing.
Yeah. Okay. Andy tells us we should close. So thank you. Yeah, it's over. You want to say something? Okay, you can say it off. Thank you very much, everyone.